All right, hey guys. So this is going to be our video going into the next weekly exercise, and we're primarily going to be focusing on the eyedropper tool and the paint bucket tool, but I want to show you a few other techniques as well. And before we get into that, though, I just want to show a couple of artists who I'm basing this project around. So we're getting into color and how to go about, utilizing color, but I thought for this exercise it would be interesting to kind of model after some of these artists that I like that work with skin and skin tone. So this first artist is Angelica Dash. She's a Brazilian photographer who she photographs people, and she what she does is she tries to find their essential base skin tone, and she matches that with the Pantone scale color. And it's just really interesting because you get to see, I mean, these are, her work deals with identity and race and skin color. And I think it's just really interesting and powerful to see all of her work laid out like this. And we can really get a sense of, just the range of color and skin tones and how much we can vary. And then the next artist here is Byron Kim, who does something similar where he does these small 8.5 by 11 portraits of his friends and family and people around him. But what he does is he just basically just paints their skin tone. And this piece is called Synecdoche, and it's been ongoing for many years now. And I just think it's a really cool play on color, and it's a conceptual reason for why we would use the colors that we use, right? And so for this project, what we're going to do is we're going to first, I'm going to show you how to make a grid to overlay over an image here. And then we're going to go into how we would use the eyedropper tool to select the dominant hues, or at least what we consider to be the dominant hues in each square. So the first thing I want you to do is, well, so let's go ahead and open a new document. And I'm going to show you a little trick here on how to get a grid overlaid onto your image here. So let's do 51 by 51 pixels, okay? And there's a reason for this, and I'll explain that when we get into there. So make sure this is on pixels and 51 by 51. 72 is fine, RGB, and then go ahead and hit create. So let's zoom way in. So I have a square that is 51 pixels wide by 51 pixels high. So what we're going to do is I'm going to unlock this background, and let's select all, because we want to select this white, and just hit delete so we get our gray checkerboard pattern here, okay? And if you change your ruler to pixels, okay, I think change that to pixels, and let's zoom in here, and I'll show you a use for this rectangular, or the single row rectangular marquee tool. So right here, single row marquee tool, the horizontal. And what I want you to do is on your grid, or on your ruler here, find where it says 25 right here, and just click, and that's going to put a selection that's 1 pixel wide over the length of our document here. And then so once that's there on 25, let's go ahead and select our paint bucket tool and just fill that, right? So if we zoom out, that's exactly right in the middle, okay? Then I'm going to Command D to get rid of that. And let's do our single column marquee tool, but vertical. And let's zoom in a little bit so we get to, so right in here where 25 is, and select there. And then we can go back to our paint bucket tool and then fill that, and then fill that. So we get this, and the reason why I had to select 51 by 51 is because the width of the marquee tool is 1 pixel. So if I place that in there, then I have exactly 25 pixels on the left and exactly 25 pixels on the right. Same thing above and below. Okay, so now we have this grid formation right here. Okay, now let's go up to Edit and Define Pattern. It's going to save this as a pattern that we'll use with our paint bucket tool. So go ahead and hit Define Pattern. We'll just name this Custom Grid. Okay. And then now let's go to what I'm going to have you do is this is going to be a digital self-portrait, right? That's pixelated. So if you come, so there's my big dumb face right there. But the way that, Photoshop identifies, these images is all through pixels. So if I zoom in, way in close, I mean, we can see, right, all of these individual pixels that make up me. And if we zoom out, it's a pretty high resolution image there, right? We can see that all of those pixels create the image of me. But before we go further, let's make sure we resize this, right? Because I made my grid, my pixel grid that I was just on is 25 by 25 pixels high and wide because I cut it in half there. So let's go to edit. Oh, I'm sorry. Let's go to image and image size. And let's make the longest dimension of your image 1600 pixels, and the width will scale accordingly. So the longest dimension at 1600. Okay. So now we have our image like this. And what we want to do is we want to apply that pattern that we were just working with. So if we go to our paint bucket tool, right, and click up here, so it says yours will be on foreground if you haven't been messing with it, but up here, let's click that to pattern. And here in this drop down menu here, you can select all these patterns, and the one that we just did is right here, right? And you can hover over it and you can see custom grid 51 by 51 pixels RGB mode. So let's click on our pattern. Okay, so we have our pattern selected. And we're going to make a new layer. So we don't want to do anything to this background. We want to keep this background here. So let's make a new layer, right? And then now with our paint bucket tool, with pattern and our custom grid selected, just go ahead and click on the image. And we see that that overlays that pattern over the entire image there. So if we zoom in, we can see we have a nice grid. Okay. And now what we're going to do is we're going to take this image and each of these individual squares, and this project might take a little bit of time, so I don't know if you want to do it all in one go. But what we're going to do is just by using our eyedropper tool and our paint bucket tool, we're going to create this image out of essentially pixels. So using your eyedropper tool, let's just get started. Let's say I'm going to click right here to sample that color. And then I'm going to click back to my paint bucket tool, but I want you guys to be using, for this project, you're going to get really familiar with I for your eyedropper and G back to your paint bucket tool, right? So click on I for eyedropper. We're going to click inside one of these grids, sample that color, and then G with our paint bucket tool. Make sure this goes back to foreground, because I was clicking wondering what was happening, and what it was doing, it was just reapplying that pattern. So make sure your paint bucket tool goes back to foreground there. So again, so I sample that, G, fill that in. And now you're going to do this. I to sample it, G to fill it, and you're going to pixelate yourself, right? And this will give you kind of a cool self-portrait made up of these individual pixels, right? I mean, the dominant hue in each one of these squares. And again, this will take a little bit of time, but think of this as a technical exercise here. And I'd like you to complete your self-portrait. And when you finish this, I'm going to have you email it to me, or I'm sorry, upload it to Laulima as a Photoshop file, so then I can kind of look at your work, and you can turn this on and off. But let's keep going here. And you'll see, I mean, eventually this will start to have a resemblance of a human form. And I'd like you to do the entire image, right? So even these areas in here that on the back of this door, right? So some of this is going to look somewhat flat in areas, but that's okay. But let's fill this entire image so we get something that looks like a digital version of yourself here, right? And then, yeah, upload to me as a Photoshop file so that I can then see your work. Okay,